one of the things that I really value about the Houston Strategy Forum is the ability just to throw out these different, very sort of high-level ideas and talk about what would it take to truly achieve the type of collaboration that we're aspiring towards, or what would it take to bring forward a project that truly harnesses every molecule in an open way and sort of get a broad spectrum of thinking about it, because you'll have operators like Shell, you'll have service companies like Schlumberger and Baker Hughes, and you'll have drilling companies to understand what future equipment might need on a rig. And you can have this truly integrated conversation.
Welcome to an episode of Strategic Conversations. We host insightful discussions with top business leaders. Today, we are hosting Mr. Bill Langin, the Senior Vice President of Exploration West and Deepwater for Shell. Mr. Langin will be a speaker at the Houston Strategy Forum's upcoming Upstream Symposium, and we're excited to host him. He really has some very interesting ideas which will help us expand our thinking. I'm quite excited to host him. I am Ravi Kathuria, the president of the Houston Strategy Forum and author of the management and leadership book, How Cohesive is Your Company, and author of Happy Soul, Hungry Mind. Strategic Conversation is hosted by the Houston Strategy Forum. If you value these conversations, please hit like and subscribe to the Houston Strategy Forum's YouTube channel. Today's episode is sponsored by Cohegic, a management consulting and executive coaching firm. Thank you for joining us, and we are looking forward to a great discussion with Mr. Langin. Bill, thank you so much, sir. Thank you for taking the time to be here today, and thank you so much for being part of the Upstream Symposium at the Houston Strategy Forum coming up next week. I enjoyed our pre-conversation here, and I'm excited by the ideas that you're sharing, sir. So let me, for our audience here in this video, let's talk about what would reinvention of the upstream sector entail? What are all the ideas that we should think about if we were starting on a blank piece of paper? How crazy could we get? How much could we push the envelope?
Yeah, thank you, Ravi, for the opportunity to participate both today and in the Upstream Symposium next week. I'm very much looking forward to it. I think the idea about reinventing upstream is fantastic, and it's wholly consistent with Shell's Powering Progress strategy. And if I start on one of our key elements around creating a world-class investment case and creating shareholder value, yes, I think one of the things that the upstream industry has to do is think about how to create more value for the entire industry. We have an expanding energy system with more and more need for a variety of sources of energy to fill the growing population's need for reliable, stable, and clean energy. And I think over the past few decades, we've seen the upstream as very competitive, and we need to find our respective places, and almost it drove an anti-collaborative approach across the upstream sector, and just due to the nature of having a fixed market at the time. But I think as we see the need for this increasing energy supply, increasing stability and security of that supply, there's an opportunity for upstream companies to come together and think more deeply around how do we create an expanding energy system and support that, which supports both the energy need, but also creates our need to create more value for our investors and shareholders. So I think the first thing is really to become much more collaborative as an upstream sector around an expanding energy system and how we can drive and support that as the energy system evolves.
Yeah, I love that point, Bill. I love that point because I tell people it may not seem like it, but the energy crisis is not over. We still have an energy crisis as population grows, and the quality of life and the expectations of people all over the world is changing. Their demand for energy is growing. And we have seen just in the last 12 months, countries across the world who have failed to provide energy to their citizens. And from Sri Lanka to South Africa, I mean, that is, and not to mention, including the state of Texas, when it struggles, when we have a storm. This is the world's leading economy, and the state of Texas struggles to provide reliable energy to its citizens in when they need it the most, right? And so we have an energy crisis, we have a climate crisis, and both have to be addressed. And the energy industry, absolutely, to your point, should come together and collaborate, because the problem that we need to solve is much bigger than any of us, right? I use this example. It's not as if we are competing food trucks that are trying to feed our populations. We are food trucks that are trying to feed and solve world hunger. Then I'm not competing with the next food truck. We're all in this together. So I
love that analogy, and actually that touches on one of the second pillars of Shell strategy we call powering lives. And if you think about the need to supply affordable, reliable energy to populations around the world, and whether that is in Texas during a freeze, or whether that's in places like Sri Lanka that you mentioned, or the hundreds of millions of people in Southern Africa that don't have reliable access to power, upstream is the core and the heartbeat of bringing new energy supplies to these people who don't have that reliable access to power. Yes. And if you think about what reliable access to energy and power means, it means in many places 10 to 15 years additional life expectancy. Yeah. And if you can get that reliable access to clean power and get away from burning biomass or whatever other dirty sources of energy you have. And in upstream, we are the first boots on the ground in many of those places. And we have the opportunity to do, as Shell says, as power lives. Yes. with our efforts, and then be proud of the good we do in that space.
Yes.
And I think we've been driven so strongly to talk about our production because that generates revenue and the returns that our investors want. And I think we miss the human aspects of the impacts we have to tell our story. And so as we begin to think about reinventing upstream, it's also reinventing the way we tell our story about powering lives in what you touched on.
Yeah, I love you bring that up, Bill, because one challenge that the industry has faced is that Wall Street doesn't give a high enough PE valuation to the industry, right? So the industry has to go tell the story about humanity to society and say, look, energy is absolutely important to the economy of the world. It is absolutely important to the quality of life, right? You talked about life expectancy, but every aspect of life today, of modern living, energy is at core to it. So we have to provide energy. We have to take care of the climate, but we have to take that story of humanity to society, but we have to take that story of this being a worthy investment, right? And so Wall Street looks at the returns that you get currently, but Wall Street also looks at what is going to be the growth of this industry, right? Is there a future for the industry? Is this industry going to be growing and creating more value? And I love thinking about that, is how does the industry completely reinvent itself? So what would you think about that, sir? How do we get Wall Street to go, this is not a sunset industry. This is the most exciting place on earth in terms of economic prosperity that we can generate?
It's a great question. And I think the first is we have to really own our performance as an industry and think about that value we create to create confidence in our ability to return the value to our investors in the way you said. So, I always love the opportunity to own my outcomes and own my future fate, right? So I do think there's an element of us truly focusing on how do we return an attractive investment to our shareholder base. I think the second is to be very open about our views of the expanding energy system and how we can contribute to that expanding energy system, but not in the old way, not in the way in which we've done it for, say, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, where we go and we think about it just as, say, a hydrocarbon development where we drill a well, have a discovery, appraise, and then build a piece of infrastructure 10 years later, it starts producing, and all of a sudden then we start getting our returns. No, it's truly what we were starting to call integrated clean energy heartlands. And how do we think about the co-development and of not just oil and gas, but using every molecule that comes out of the ground to ultimately provide both energy to populations, but also to provide another source of revenue that our investors can benefit from. And so if you think about, producing oil and the products that can create, fine, we have legacy markets for that, and that will be valuable for decades to come. But how do we harness the natural gas stream to not only produce hydrogen, but to also then fuel natural gas power to displace dirtier sources of power in the grid? But then things like produced water, and how do we harness that as in a beneficial reuse way and as an additional source of revenue? Because as we all know, water may become one of the scarcest resources on the planet as time progresses. And so I think we need to truly think broadly about every single molecule that comes out of the ground, in service of our efforts and expand our thinking on how we do that. And I think if we do that in a truly integrated way, we can do it in a financially attractive way at the same time, and really begin to, deliver the types of returns to our investors, to deliver additional sources of energy to fill that growing energy need we talked about, and then also to deliver a cleaner total energy system and sort of meet these three different aspects that the world is looking to us to deliver.
Yeah, Bill, I applaud you because I love that point so much. And I'm going to make sure that next week at the Upstream Symposium, we're going to really dive into that because, the example of the farmer who produces corn, not only is the kernel of corn valuable, but the husk, the stem, the rest of the plant, they take everything that is produced and create value out of it. And so the oil and gas industry is producing oil, but as you made the point, it's producing a lot of water. And that water is going to be a very precious commodity, and you're producing natural gas. If you take every molecule that the industry is producing and make that valuable, including the CO2, we talked a little bit about CO2. CO2 is considered a waste today, something to be sequestered and buried underground. But that CO2, if it became a valuable feed for new applications, then every molecule that you produce is going to be valuable. And Wall Street would take note of that. Appreciate that point very much, sir. Sir, what should be next Wednesday, as you look at the other oil and gas leaders who are going to be joining you at the panel, what should be our focus of discussion, and why should somebody take the time to come attend?
One of the things that I really value about the Houston Strategy Forum is the ability just to throw out these different, very sort of high-level ideas and talk about what would it take to truly achieve the type of collaboration that we're aspiring towards, or what would it take to bring forward a project that truly harnesses every molecule in an open way and sort of get a broad spectrum of thinking about it, because you'll have operators like Shell, you'll have service companies like Schlumberger and Baker Hughes, and you'll have drilling companies to understand what future equipment might need on a rig. And you can have this truly integrated conversation around, well, what would be the opportunities, but also what would be the limitations, what would have to be realized in all the different elements that would of this industry that would have come together to truly be transformative. And you don't get that just by having a conversation in your own corridors. And so for me, it's that diversity of thought and with people that are deeply experienced across the globe that I think is a truly unique element.
Wonderful, sir. I appreciate the plug for the Houston Strategy Forum. Makes us happy. Thank you. We look forward, Mr. Langin, to host you at the Upstream Symposium next week. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to it. And please, all of you who are watching this video, join us. As you can see, we're going to have a fantastic discussion. Mr. Langin, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Appreciate you very much.
Thanks, and I'm really looking forward to it.